The alarm screamed through the command center as 200 Krolvian warships materialized in Earth's orbital space. Queen Helena Carter stood at the viewport, her reflection ghosting over the massive alien fleet that had just torn through reality itself. Every ship bristled with weapons that could glass a continent in minutes. Her military advisor shouted status reports, but Helena remained silent, counting the destroyer-class vessels with cold precision. This wasn't a scouting party. This was an execution force. The transmission came through without request for permission. A reptilian face filled every screen in the room, scales the color of old bronze, eyes like molten copper. Commander Vekthar of the Krolvian Empire. His voice carried the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. Human authority. You will surrender all military assets within the hour. Your queen will present herself aboard my flagship for processing. Refusal means extinction. You have seen what we do to those who resist. Helena's chief of defense reached for the weapons array, but she raised one hand, stopping him cold. Around the room, faces turned toward her, desperate and terrified. They wanted her to hide, to run, to let someone else handle this nightmare. Instead, she stepped closer to the camera. Commander Vekthar, I am Queen Helena Carter of Earth. I will meet you face to face, but not as a prisoner. Grant me safe passage to discuss terms where you will find humanity far more costly than you anticipate. The alien's expression shifted. Surprise, perhaps? Maybe amusement? His officers murmured in their harsh language behind him. You believe you have terms to offer? Your fleet consists of primitive fusion drives and kinetic weapons. We have cracked stellar cores. What could you possibly negotiate? Helena met his gaze without flinching. The only thing that matters. Time. You can have Earth in ashes within the day, Commander, but I suspect the Krolvian Empire didn't send 200 warships just to vaporize one planet. You want something specific. Give me 1 hour aboard your ship. If you're unsatisfied, you lose nothing. The silence stretched. Vektar's officers argued behind him, their translation chips spitting rapid-fire objections that the human systems couldn't fully process. Finally, Vekthar's hand sliced through the air, silencing them. 1 hour. You will come alone, unarmed. Any deviation and your cities burn. The transmission cut. Helena turned to face her council. They looked at her like she'd volunteered for execution. Your Majesty, this is suicide, her chief advisor said, his voice shaking. They'll take you hostage. Use you as leverage. Helena moved to the equipment lockers, pulling out a slim data pad and a formal diplomatic jacket. They're going to do that regardless. But I studied the Krolvian conquest archives for 3 years after first contact with neighboring systems. Their culture has rules, protocols. If I can exploit those, we have a chance. A chance at what? Delaying the inevitable? She secured the jacket and faced them all. These people had followed her through the resource wars, through the colony failures, through every disaster that had nearly broken humanity in the last decade. They deserved honesty. A chance at survival, at something better than ashes. Trust me, one more time. 20 minutes later, Helena stood in the docking bay of her shuttle as it magnetically clamped to the Krolvian flagship. The airlock hissed open, revealing a corridor that seemed carved from black glass and lined with glowing veins of amber light. 6 Krolvian soldiers waited, each standing over 7 feet tall, armored in segmented plates that moved like liquid metal. They said nothing, simply turned and began walking. Helena followed. The ship hummed with power that made Earth's finest vessels feel like children's toys. Every surface seemed alive, pulsing with energy. The soldiers led her through passages that twisted and curved in ways that defied human architecture, until finally they reached a massive chamber. At its center stood Commander Vekthar. Up close, he was even more imposing. Scars crossed his scales in patterns that suggested decades of combat. His armor bore markings that Helena's research identified as victory tallies, hundreds of them. Behind him, his senior officers formed a semicircle, watching her with predatory interest. You are either incredibly brave or fatally ignorant, Vekthar said, his voice a low rumble. I have not decided which. Helena stepped forward, keeping her hands visible and open. I'm a realist, Commander. You didn't come here for a simple conquest. The Krolvian Empire doesn't waste this much firepower on primitive civilizations unless there's strategic value. Vekthar's head tilted slightly. You assume much. I assume nothing. I studied your people's history. Every world you've taken in the last century has offered something unique. Resources, technology, strategic position. Earth has mineral wealth, yes, but nothing you couldn't strip mine from a dozen lifeless systems with far less resistance. So I'll ask directly, what do you really want? For a moment, something like respect flickered in those copper eyes. Then Vekthar gestured, and a holographic display materialized between them. It showed Earth, rotating slowly, annotated with Krolvian text. Your world sits at a critical junction point in this spiral arm. Control of Earth means control of 9 trade routes and access to the outer systems. But more than geography, the Krolvian Empire has a tradition. When we conquer a world of sufficient development, we take a symbol of that world's authority as a war prize. You, Queen Helena Carter, will become my bonded consort. Through you, Earth becomes integrated into the Empire. Your people serve. Your resources flow to our war machine, and you ensure compliance through your presence at my side. The words hit like physical blows. Helena's stomach turned, but she kept her expression neutral. Around the chamber, Krolvian officers watched her reaction with obvious anticipation. They expected collapse, tears, begging. Instead, Helena laughed. Not hysterical laughter, but genuine, sharp amusement. Vekthar's eyes narrowed dangerously. You find your fate entertaining? Helena shook her head, pulling out her datapad. I find it fascinating that you're invoking the right of claimed authority without following proper protocol. Commander, according to subsection 7 of the Krolvian conquest codes, ratified 400 years ago during the Mithera Accords, any claim of this nature requires 3 conditions. First, the claiming commander must have personally led the siege. Second, the claimed authority must be given opportunity to challenge the claim's legitimacy through formal discourse. Third, and most importantly, the claim can be substituted with an alternative arrangement if both parties agree, and if such arrangement better serves the Empire's interests. The chamber went absolutely silent. Every Krolvian eye locked onto Helena with new intensity. Vekthar's expression transformed from amused condescension to sharp focus. You quote our law codes? I told you, Commander. I studied. The question is, do you honor your own traditions, or are they just convenient tools when they suit you? Vekthar stepped closer, towering over her. Helena held her ground. She could smell the ozone scent of his armor, see her own reflection in his polished breastplate. When he spoke, his voice carried an edge that could cut steel. You dare challenge the legitimacy of my claim? I challenge its necessity, not its legitimacy. You fulfilled the first condition. You're here, leading this fleet personally, and you've now given me opportunity for discourse, satisfying the second. Which brings us to the third. I'm proposing an alternative arrangement, Commander Vekthar, one that serves the Krolvian Empire's interests far better than a forced marriage and resentful compliance. One of Vekthar's officers, a female with scales that shimmered dark purple, stepped forward. Her voice dripped with contempt. The human speaks of serving our interests? What could your primitive world possibly offer that exceeds total subjugation? Helena turned to face her directly. Survival. Because in approximately 6 months, none of this will matter. Not your claim, not your fleet, not even your empire. The Syndral Swarm is coming. The reaction was immediate and violent. Officers erupted in denial and outrage. Vekthar silenced them with a single gesture, his eyes never leaving Helena. The swarm operates in the deep dark, Scavenger, he said carefully. They haven't been seen in this sector for 3 generations. Helena activated her datapad, projecting data into the shared holographic space. They haven't been seen because they've been growing, feeding, building. Human deep space monitoring stations picked up their scout ships 4 months ago. We tracked them, analyzed their trajectory. Commander, the swarm isn't just coming to this sector. They're heading straight for the core systems, yours included. She expanded the projection, showing movement patterns, energy signatures, estimated fleet sizes. The numbers were staggering. Millions of bioships, each one a living weapon, moving in coordinated waves that consumed everything in their path. Vekthar studied the data with disturbing intensity. If this is fabrication meant to delay conquest, then you'll know within the hour. Because I'm not just offering you data, Commander. I'm offering you proof. 3 days ago, one of your own outposts in the Kelmar system went dark. You attributed it to technical failure. It wasn't. It was a swarm scout attack. And I can save it. The purple-scaled officer hissed. Impossible. You cannot know the status of our remote installations. Helena smiled without humor. We've been monitoring your communications for 2 years, learning your protocols, your encryption, your deployment patterns. You think we were just sitting here waiting to be conquered? We were preparing. And one of those preparations was developing countermeasures against Syndral bioweapons. The outpost at Kelmar still has 47 survivors in the lower levels. They have maybe 6 hours of oxygen left. Let me save them, Commander. Let me prove that humanity has value beyond subjugation. Vekthar was silent for a long moment. Helena could see the calculation happening behind those copper eyes. Pride warred with pragmatism. The desire to crush her insolence fought against the possibility that she might be offering something genuinely useful. Finally, he spoke. If you fail, if this is deception, I will personally execute every human in your capital city before moving on to the rest of your world. If I fail, I'll activate the execution codes myself. Vekthar gestured sharply. Prepare a transport. The human comes with us to Kelmar. And ready weapons. If this is a trap, I want the capacity to glass her entire planet before she draws another breath. The journey to Kelmar's system took 3 hours at Krolvian faster-than-light speeds. Helena spent the time in a secured cabin, reviewing specifications for the shield technology that humanity had developed. It wasn't perfect. The prototype had only been tested on small-scale deployments, but the theory was sound, and if the swarm's bioweapons were anything like the samples her scientists had analyzed from ancient wreckage, it would work. When they dropped out of faster-than-light near Kelmar, the outpost looked like a corpse. The station floated dead in space, its lights extinguished, its outer hull covered in the distinctive organic growths that marked Syndral infection. Worse, 3 swarm scout ships still circled it, harvesting whatever biological material remained. Vekthar's tactical officer called out targets. Scouts detected. Standard Syndral Hunter configuration. They're latched onto the station's bioreserves. Weapons locked, another officer confirmed. Helena stepped onto the command deck uninvited, drawing sharp looks from every Krolvian present. Don't fire yet. You'll destabilize the organic matter and kill anyone left inside. Give me access to your communications array. Vekthar's expression could have melted hull plating. You presume much, human. You wanted proof. I'm giving it to you. But I need your systems to do it. A tense pause. Then Vekthar nodded to his communications officer. Grant her access. Limited and monitored. Helena worked quickly, her fingers dancing across the alien interface with surprising fluency. She'd studied Krolvian systems, yes, but actually using them was different. The controls responded to pressure and temperature in addition to touch, forcing her to adapt on the fly. Behind her, she could feel Vekthar watching every move. I'm broadcasting a frequency that disrupts Syndral neural networks, she explained as she worked. It won't kill them, but it'll force them to detach and retreat. The signal needs to be precisely calibrated to avoid damaging the survivors inside. The purple-scaled officer scoffed. Syndral organisms don't retreat. They consume or die. They retreat when their coordination breaks down. Their entire species operates on linked consciousness. Disrupt the link, and individual organisms default to preservation protocols. Watch. Helena activated the signal. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the organic growths on the station's hull began to writhe and spasm. The swarm scout ships broke away, their movement patterns shifting from coordinated hunting to erratic escape behavior. Within a minute, they'd vanished into faster-than-light, leaving the station floating in silence. Vekthar's officers stared at the displays in stunned disbelief. The purple-scaled one approached the sensor console, running multiple verification scans. The swarm ships are gone. The organic matter is dying. How? Helena shut down the signal before it could damage the station's remaining systems. Because we studied them. Because we prepared. Because humanity doesn't wait to be saved, Commander. We save ourselves. Now can we please extract those survivors before they suffocate? Vekthar gave the orders. A rescue team deployed, cutting through the infected sections and reaching the lower levels. 47 Krolvian personnel emerged, weak and traumatized but alive. The gratitude in their eyes when they saw their commander was unmistakable. The confusion when they saw Helena was equally clear. On the journey back to Earth's orbital space, the atmosphere aboard the flagship had shifted. Krolvian officers who'd looked at Helena with contempt now regarded her with something closer to wary respect. The purple-scaled officer, whose name Helena learned was Zinthara, actually nodded to her in the corridor, but it was Vekthar's reaction that mattered most. He summoned Helena to his private strategy chamber, a smaller room dominated by tactical displays and what appeared to be personal trophies from past conquests. "You were not lying," he said without preamble. "The swarm is moving. Our deep space reconnaissance confirms scout activity in 17 systems. The projections you showed me were conservative. The actual threat is larger." Helena nodded. "I know. We've been tracking their expansion for months. They're not just coming, Commander. They're organizing. This isn't a random swarm anymore. It's a coordinated invasion force." Vekthar's claws tapped against the display console, a rhythmic sound that suggested deep thought. "Your shield technology. Can it be scaled for fleet deployment?" "With the right resources and manufacturing capacity, yes. But Earth doesn't have that capacity. We barely have enough to protect our own planet. Which brings us back to my alternative arrangement." Vekthar turned to face her fully. "You want an alliance. I want survival for both our peoples. The Krolvian Empire has the industrial power and military strength. Humanity has the technology to counter the swarm's primary advantage. Separately, we both fall. Together, we have a chance. A real chance." The commander paced the chamber like a caged predator. "The Empire does not form alliances with primitive worlds. We conquer. We integrate. We dominate. Then you'll die maintaining your pride. Because the swarm doesn't care about your traditions or your conquest records. They'll strip your worlds down to bedrock and move on." "Is that really how you want the Krolvian Empire to end? Consumed by monsters because you refuse to adapt?" Vekthar stopped pacing, his copper eyes fixed on Helena with an intensity that made her heartbeat spike. "You speak to me as though we are equals. In this moment we are. You need what I can offer. I need what you can provide. That's not submission, Commander. It's pragmatism." For a long moment Vekthar said nothing. Then he brought up a new display. It showed a communication from the Krolvian High Command, stamped with priority codes that made even Helena's limited understanding of their system recognize its importance. "My superiors have sent new orders. They demand completion of Earth's conquest within 48 hours, or I am to be recalled and executed for failure. In the Empire's eyes, I have already wasted too much time on your world. They view negotiation as weakness." Helena felt ice run through her veins. "They'll send another commander, someone less willing to listen. Yes, and your world burns regardless." Vekthar's expression was unreadable. Unless. Unless what? Unless the conquest appears to succeed. Unless you surrender publicly, formally, with all appropriate ceremony. Unless Earth becomes part of the Krolvian Empire in official capacity, while maintaining operational independence in secret. A false conquest. A performance that satisfies the High Command while allowing us to prepare for the real threat. Helena's mind raced through the implications. It was brilliant and insane in equal measure. "You're talking about treason. If your superiors discover the deception, I am executed along with my entire command structure. Yes, but if we do nothing, we die to the swarm anyway. At least this way, we die fighting for something that matters." Vekthar moved closer. "I have spent 30 years conquering worlds for the Empire, bringing glory to my people through subjugation and blood. And in all that time, I have never met another species that looked at me and saw anything but a monster to be feared or destroyed. You looked at me and saw a potential ally. Perhaps it is time the Krolvian Empire learned the difference between conquest and cooperation. Helena extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Then let's give them a show they'll never forget. Vekthar stared at her hand for a moment, then gripped it carefully, his scaled palm warm and rough against hers. The false surrender ceremony will require careful planning. My officers must believe it is genuine, or the deception will fail. Only my inner circle can know the truth. How many is that? 4 commanders, including Zinthara. They are loyal to me personally, not just the Empire. But even they will require convincing. Helena nodded. Then let's convince them. Show them the full swarm projections. Show them what's coming if we don't act now. Fear is a powerful motivator, Commander. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 days later. In that time, Helena worked with Vekthar's inner circle to design a surrender that would satisfy the High Command's requirements, while secretly establishing the framework for joint military operations. Zinthara proved surprisingly helpful, her tactical mind grasping the necessity immediately once she saw the full scope of this swarm threat. The hardest part will be maintaining the deception during integration protocols, Zinthara explained as they reviewed the plans. High Command will send inspectors to verify proper subjugation. They will expect to see human resistance crushed, infrastructure absorbed, military command transferred completely. Helena pulled up schematics of Earth's defensive networks. We can stage that. Create false reports, manipulate data feeds, show them exactly what they want to see. Humanity has gotten very good at information warfare. Vekthar's second officer, a massive male named Krothar, rumbled disapproval. Deception is not the Krolvian way. It is dishonorable. Dishonor is watching your people die when you could have prevented it. Helena shot back. Your codes and traditions are valuable, but they're not suicide pacts. Adapt or perish, Commander Krothar. That's the real tradition that keeps species alive. Krothar's eyes flared, but Vekthar raised a hand. She speaks truth, old friend. The universe has changed. We must change with it. The day of the ceremony arrived with Earth's entire population watching. Helena stood on a raised platform in the capital city square, surrounded by Krolvian soldiers in full ceremonial armor. Above, the sky darkened with the shadows of warships arranged in precise formation. Vekthar stood opposite her, his presence commanding the attention of billions. The ritual words were spoken in both languages. Helena knelt, a gesture that made her sick but was necessary for the performance. Vekthar placed a traditional binding medallion around her neck, the metal warm against her skin. To the watching Empire, it symbolized her status as claimed authority, a trophy of conquest. To Helena and the small circle who knew the truth, it was a symbol of partnership forged in desperation. By the ancient rights of the Krolvian Empire, Vekthar declared, his voice carried across every broadcast system on Earth and transmitted across space to the High Command, I claim this world and its authority. Let none question the Empire's dominion. Let all witness the price of resistance. Helena spoke her part, the words tasting like ash. I surrender Earth's sovereignty. I pledge compliance. I accept the Empire's authority. The watching crowds played their part perfectly, showing the mixture of defeat and fear that the Krolvian inspectors would expect. But in encrypted channels hidden beneath the public broadcasts, human and Krolvian engineers were already sharing technical specifications. Military coordinators were plotting joint defensive positions. Scientists were collaborating on scaling the anti-swarm technology. The false conquest was complete. The real work had just begun. 3 months later, the combined fleet hung in space at the edge of human territory. 50 Krolvian warships alongside 200 human vessels retrofitted with Krolvian weapons and shields. It looked like an occupation force. It was actually an integrated battle group, the first of its kind. Helena stood on the bridge of Vekthar's flagship, which she learned was called the Relentless Judgment. The name felt grimly appropriate. Beside her, Vekthar studied tactical displays showing swarm approach vectors. They will be here within the hour, he said quietly. First wave estimates put their numbers at 3,000 bioships. We have 250 vessels. We also have the shield harmonics they don't expect, and a defense strategy built on actual cooperation instead of just throwing bodies at the problem. Helena pulled up the defensive grid. Human ships form the outer shell, using mobility to draw them in. Your heavy cruisers hit them from elevated positions once they're committed. We funnel them into kill zones where the anti-swarm frequencies are strongest. Zinthara approached from the tactical station. High Command is requesting updated status reports. They're questioning why we've repositioned so much of the fleet to the outer territories. Vekthar didn't look away from the displays. Tell them we are securing critical supply routes and preventing human resistance cells from forming in the border systems. It is technically true. The deception grows more difficult to maintain, Zinthara warned. Inspectors arrive next month. They will ask uncomfortable questions. Helena met her gaze steadily. Let them ask. By then, we'll have killed so many swarm ships that the High Command will be too busy reevaluating threat priorities to worry about procedural irregularities. The alarm came exactly 47 minutes later. Long-range sensors detected the first wave of swarm ships dropping out of faster-than-light at the system's edge. The bioships looked like nothing else in the galaxy. Organic and mechanical merged into something nightmarish. They moved with disturbing coordination, flowing through space like schools of predatory fish. All ships to battle positions, Vekthar commanded. The Krolvian vessels moved with precision, taking elevated positions while human ships spread into a defensive arc. Begin the symphony. Helena activated the anti-swarm frequency generators. The signal washed across space, invisible but devastating to Syndral neural networks. The effect was immediate. The perfect coordination of the swarm ships faltered, individual organisms breaking formation as their linked consciousness fragmented. Now, Helena said. Human ships surged forward, their smaller size allowing for rapid course changes that the bioships couldn't match. Kinetic rounds and missile salvos tore into the disrupted formation. Behind them, Krolvian heavy cruisers opened fire with plasma cannons that boiled the organic hulls into vapor. The battle became a brutal dance of coordination and violence. When swarm ships adapted to the frequency, human vessels shifted the harmonics. When bioships tried to flank, Krolvian destroyers intercepted them. The kill zones functioned exactly as designed, funneling the enemy into concentrated fire that nothing could survive. 2 hours later, the last swarm ship died in a burst of organic matter and escaping atmosphere. The combined fleet had lost 14 vessels, 7 human and 7 Krolvian, but they'd destroyed over 3,000 enemy ships. The debris field stretched for millions of kilometers, a testament to what cooperation could achieve. On the Relentless Judgment's bridge, exhausted crews stared at the tactical displays in disbelief. They'd won. Against impossible odds, they'd actually won. Vekthar turned to Helena, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw something like genuine respect in those copper eyes. Your people fought with honor, with intelligence, with courage that matches anything the Krolvian Empire has produced. Helena managed a tired smile. Your people trusted us enough to fight beside us instead of above us. That matters more than you know. The communication board lit up with incoming transmissions, human systems celebrating the victory, Krolvian vessels requesting new orders, and buried among them, a priority message from the Krolvian High Command. Zinthara routed it to Vekthar's private console. He read it in silence, his expression carefully neutral. Then he showed it to Helena. They want a full report on the engagement. They detected the swarm presence and our response. They are calling it the most significant military victory in recent history, and they want to understand how we achieved it. Helena felt her stomach tighten. The deception is over. Perhaps, this is the moment we transform it into truth. Vekthar looked around the bridge at his officers, at the human liaison staff working alongside Krolvian tactical experts. We tell them the truth, that Earth was not conquered but integrated, that the claim was not domination but alliance, that we achieved victory not through subjugation but through cooperation, and we dare them to question results that saved Krolvian lives and proved effective against the Empire's greatest threat. They could still execute you, Zinthara pointed out. This violates every protocol. Vekthar's laugh was harsh and genuine. Let them try. I have 250 ships that just prove the value of what we have built here. I have commanders on every vessel who saw their crews fight and die beside humans as equals. and I have evidence that our way works while the old way would have left us dead. The High Command can accept this new reality, or they can try to suppress it and watch the Empire crumble when the next swarm wave arrives." Helena stepped beside him, still wearing the binding medallion that now meant something entirely different than intended. "We tell them together. Joint statement, joint command structure, joint future. They can accept it or they can watch us leave and form our own alliance separate from the Empire." The message was crafted carefully over the next hours. It laid out the full situation in terms that emphasized pragmatism over sentiment. The swarm threat was real and growing. Traditional conquest methods would fail against an enemy that didn't value territory or surrender. The human-Krolvian partnership had proven effective in combat, and most importantly, it could be replicated across other integrated species, transforming the Empire from a conquering force into a defensive coalition. The High Command's response took 3 days. 3 days of uncertainty, during which Helena coordinated with Earth to prepare for every possible outcome. From full acceptance to total war, Vekthar did the same with his fleet, quietly ensuring that his commanders understood they might be choosing between the Empire and survival. When the response finally came, it was not what anyone expected. The High Command didn't accept the alliance. They didn't reject it either. Instead, they declared a probationary period, 6 months to prove that the human-Krolvian integration could be sustained and replicated. During that time, Vekthar would be promoted to Supreme Commander of Border Defense, with authority to experiment with new tactical doctrines. Helena would be recognized not as a conquered authority, but as a diplomatic partner with official standing. It wasn't perfect. It left questions unanswered and created a bureaucratic nightmare of overlapping jurisdictions, but it was permission to continue. Permission to build something unprecedented. Helena read the message twice to make sure she understood it correctly. "They're letting us do this. Actually letting us do this." Vektar's expression was unreadable. "They are hedging their bets. If we succeed, they claim credit for innovation. If we fail, they execute us for treason and return to traditional methods. But for now, we have room to prove ourselves." Over the following months, the partnership deepened and expanded. Human engineers worked alongside Krolvian scientists to scale the anti-swarm technology. Joint training exercises became routine. Cultural exchange programs began, awkward at first but growing more natural as both species learned to see each other as allies rather than conquerors and conquered. The second swarm wave arrived in month 4. This time they faced a combined force of 600 ships, fully integrated and coordinated. The battle was fiercer than the first, lasting nearly 8 hours and stretching both species to their limits. But when it ended, the swarm had lost over 7,000 vessels, while the Alliance casualties remained under 100 ships. The High Command sent new orders after that victory: expand the integration program to 3 neighboring species, begin full-scale production of anti-swarm systems across all territories, and formally recognize the human-Krolvian alliance as a strategic template for future defensive operations. Helena stood with Vekthar on the observation deck of the Relentless Judgment, watching human and Krolvian ships moving in perfect formation during a training exercise. The vessel that had once represented her people's subjugation now felt like a second home. The commander who had claimed her as a war prize had become her closest ally and friend. "Do you think the Empire will truly change?" she asked. "Or are we just a temporary aberration they'll eliminate once the swarm is defeated?" Vekthar was silent for a long moment, watching the ships move through the stars. "I think we have proven that strength comes in many forms. That cooperation can achieve what domination never could. Whether the Empire accepts that permanently depends on us, on continuing to prove the value of what we have built here, on showing that alliance is not weakness, but the highest form of strategic wisdom." Helena touched the binding medallion still around her neck. She'd kept it as a reminder of how this had all begun. A forced claim that should have ended with Earth's subjugation and her own loss of freedom. Instead, it had become a symbol of transformation. Of the moment when 2 species chose survival over pride, partnership over conquest. "Then we keep fighting," she said. "Not just against the swarm, but for this vision, for a future where strength means standing together instead of standing over. Vekthar's scaled hand settled on her shoulder in a gesture that had become familiar. Together, he agreed, until the last swarm ship falls and the galaxy is safe, and perhaps beyond that as well. Below them, human and Krolvian vessels continued their synchronized dance through the void. Ships that had once faced each other as enemies now moved as one, their combined strength greater than any force the galaxy had ever seen. The forced claim had failed, but from that failure, something far more valuable had emerged. An alliance forged not in domination but in mutual respect, tested in fire and tempered by necessity into something that might just save them all.